The starship Endurance landed on Titanos, the largest planet humanity had ever seen. Its size defied imagination, with continents stretching beyond the horizon and trees so tall their tops disappeared into the clouds. Rivers were wider than some Earth oceans, and the creatures were equally enormous. Captain Leela Vargas stared out from the observation deck, her heart pounding. "All right, team," she said, turning to her crew. "We're here to explore, adapt, and survive. Let's show Titanos what humans are made of." The Endurance crew consisted of 10 explorers, each trained to handle extreme environments. But Titanos was different. From the moment they stepped outside, gravity pushed down on them like an invisible giant. Walking felt like wading through deep water. Even their advanced suits could barely counteract the planet's crushing pull. As the crew set up their base camp, Lila couldn't help but notice how small everything they brought seemed in comparison to the landscape. Their tents were dwarfed by the surrounding trees, and their vehicles looked like toys next to the boulders scattered across the land. "Captain, we've got movement," called Samir, the team's biologist, pointing at the forest. From the shadows emerged the Titanites, the native inhabitants of Titanos. They were enormous, gentle-looking beings with shimmering, translucent skin and eyes that glowed softly. They moved slowly, their massive forms shaking the ground with each step. One of them crouched down, peering curiously at the humans. "Small," it rumbled, its voice deep and resonant. "Fragile. How do you survive on a world this big?" Leela straightened up, meeting the giant's gaze. "We survive by using our brains," she replied. "Let us show you." The Titanites seemed amused but intrigued, allowing the humans to continue their exploration. Over the next few days, the crew faced challenges that tested their limits. The gravity made simple tasks exhausting. Water and food supplies ran low, as they underestimated the effort required to collect resources in such a harsh environment. Worse, the weather turned violent. Storms unlike anything they'd seen on Earth began to brew, with winds strong enough to uproot trees and rain that felt like falling rocks. The Titanites watched from a distance, their large bodies sturdy enough to endure the storms. One evening, the Titanites returned, bringing gifts, massive fruits, and containers of clean water. "Your strength is small," said their leader, a Titanite named Aura, "but your spirit is different. We wish to learn." Leela smiled, realizing this was an opportunity to forge an alliance. She and her team began teaching the Titanites about human tools and ingenuity. In return, the Titanites shared their knowledge of the land, helping the humans find shelter in hidden caves that could withstand the storms. But just as the humans started to adapt, disaster struck. A superstorm, spanning thousands of miles, was heading straight for their base. The storm's sheer size and speed left no room for escape. Leela gathered her crew and turned to Aurea. "We need to build a shelter, something big enough for all of us Titanites and humans." Aurea hesitated. "This storm is stronger than any before. How can you, so small, hope to survive it?" Leela clenched her fists. "Because we have to. Together, we can do this." The humans and Titanites worked side by side, racing against time. The Titanites used their immense strength to carry massive rocks, while the humans designed a structure that combined their advanced materials with the planet's natural resources. Despite their size, the humans took the lead, directing the construction and finding creative solutions to problems. When the storm finally hit, the shelter held firm. Inside, the Titanites watched in awe as the humans used their technology to track the storm's progress and keep everyone safe. After 3 days, the storm passed, leaving the landscape scarred but the shelter intact. The Titanites emerged, marveling at the humans' ingenuity. "You are small," Aura said, his glowing eyes filled with respect. "But your ideas are bigger than even this planet." Leela smiled, exhausted but proud. "Size isn't everything. It's how you use what you have." The humans had not only survived on Titanos, they had proven that even on the largest planet, their spirit and intelligence could overcome any challenge. As the Titanites and humans began working together to explore and adapt further, Lila felt a spark of hope. Titanos was vast, but humanity's potential was limitless. The planet Hyperion stretched endlessly in every direction, a terraformed giant that dwarfed anything humanity had encountered before. It was so massive that traveling from one settlement to another could take years by traditional means. The settlers had built small colonies, scattered like specks on the planet's vast surface. They were isolated, struggling, and slowly losing hope. Dr. Marcus Way stood on a rocky cliff, looking out at the horizon. It felt like staring into infinity. "If we can't connect this planet," he said to his assistant, "Ava, then we'll lose it." Humanity didn't come all this way to fail. Marcus was the leader of New Dawn Colony, one of the few settlements still thriving. Most others were struggling with resource shortages and the sheer impossibility of reaching each other in time. Supplies ran out before help could arrive. Settlers were abandoning their dreams and returning to space stations in orbit. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up. He had a plan. "We'll build nomad cities," he announced to his colony during a meeting. Massive, mobile structures powered by Hyperion's natural energy fields. These moving cities will allow us to explore, trade, and survive this endless planet. The settlers were skeptical. "How can you build something that big?" one woman asked. "Hyperion is too vast for us to conquer." Marcus smiled. "Hyperion is big, but humans think bigger." The work began immediately. Engineers designed enormous mobile cities equipped with solar collectors and gravity-powered engines. They were designed to travel for years without stopping, carrying entire communities with them. Builders toiled day and night, crafting the first prototype, which Marcus named Endeavor.ase. The Endeavor rolled out of the workshop. A massive storm loomed on the horizon. Hyperion storms were legendary, capable of wiping out entire settlements. The settlers hesitated, fearing the worst. "We can't delay," Marcus said. "If we wait, we'll never move forward. Trust the Endeavor." The settlers boarded the nomad city, their fear turning into awe as the massive structure powered up. It rolled across Hyperion's endless plains, its engines humming with energy. The storm struck, but the Endeavor held steady, its reinforced hull deflecting the winds and rain. For the first time, humanity had a machine capable of surviving Hyperion's harshest challenges. The settlers cheered. "We did it!" Ava shouted, her voice barely audible over the storm. Marcus simply smiled. The Endeavor began its journey, traveling across the planet's vast, uncharted terrain. It discovered new resources, from rich mineral deposits to strange plants that could be turned into food. The settlers learned to adapt to life on the move, planting crops inside the mobile city and creating workshops for building new tools. But the journey wasn't without dangers. Giant predators, unique to Hyperion, attacked the Endeavor one night. The creatures were unlike anything seen on Earth, massive reptilian beasts with glowing eyes and sharp claws. The settlers worked together, using traps and flares to drive them away. The biggest challenge, however, came when the Endeavor reached a canyon too wide to cross. The settlers despaired, thinking their journey was over. But Marcus refused to give up. "We'll build a bridge," he declared. "It'll take weeks," Ava argued. "Then we'll take weeks," Marcus replied. "Hyperion won't defeat us." Using materials they gathered along the way, the settlers constructed a massive suspension bridge anchored by the canyon's natural rock formations. It was a feat of engineering that united everyone on the Endeavor. When the nomad city finally crossed the canyon, cheers erupted from the settlers.asa. The Endeavor continued its journey. It encountered other colonies that had been cut off for years. Some settlers had given up, living in isolation with dwindling supplies. Others had adapted in strange ways, forming new cultures influenced by the planet's challenges. Marcus welcomed them all, offering supplies and a place aboard the Endeavor. Slowly, other colonies began building their own nomad cities, inspired by Marcus's vision. The turning point came when the settlers discovered an ancient alien artifact buried deep within Hyperion's plains. It was a message left behind by a civilization that had tried and failed to conquer the planet. The message read, "Too vast. Too harsh. No species can tame this world." The settlers looked to Marcus for his reaction. He simply laughed. "They didn't have us." Using the artifact's technology, the settlers created a planet-wide communication network. Satellite beacons were launched into Hyperion's orbit, connecting the nomad cities and scattered colonies for the first time. Messages, trade routes, and resources flowed freely, uniting humanity across the endless planet. As Marcus stood on the deck of the Endeavor, now one of dozens of nomad cities roaming Hyperion, he watched the horizon. It still stretched endlessly, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Hyperion isn't too big, he said to Ava. It's just the right size for humanity's dreams. The settlers had transformed the impossible into a new way of life. Hyperion's vastness was no longer a threat, it was humanity's greatest opportunity. The spaceship Nova Dawn spiraled out of control, its engines failing as it plummeted toward the planet Colossus. The crew braced for impact, alarms blaring in their ears. When the ship finally crashed into the surface, silence followed, a stillness broken only by the sound of fires crackling and metal groaning. Eliza Cole, the navigator, pulled herself out of her harness and looked around. "Is everyone okay?" she called out. One by one, the crew members responded, though a few groaned in pain. Out of the original 20, only 8 were still alive and able to move. Eliza's heart sank. They stepped out of the wreckage and onto the surface of Colossus. It was a world of giants. Mountains loomed so high they disappeared into the clouds. Trees were as wide as city blocks, and the ground was covered with plants the size of houses. Even the insects were enormous, with one beetle scuttling past them that could have crushed their crashed ship. "This place isn't just big," muttered Carter, the mechanic. "It's a nightmare." The crew's survival suits helped them withstand the planet's crushing gravity, but they wouldn't last forever. Their food and water supplies were limited, and the ship's distress beacon was destroyed in the crash. "We need a plan," Elijah said firmly, taking charge. "First, we find shelter. Then, we figure out how to signal for rescue." They scavenged what they could from the wreckage tools, scraps of metal, and a few functional drones. The planet's gravity made every movement exhausting, but they pushed on, dragging supplies toward a rocky outcrop for cover. As night fell, the crew discovered another terrifying fact about Colossus: its predators. The ground trembled as a massive, reptilian creature emerged from the forest. It had glowing yellow eyes, sharp claws, and scales that shimmered like metal. "Get down," Eliza hissed, pulling the team behind the rocks. The creature sniffed the air, its giant nostrils flaring as it searched for prey. One of the drones buzzed to life, its engine sparking. The noise drew the predator's attention, and it lunged, smashing the drone into pieces. Using the distraction, Elijah and the crew fled deeper into the rocky terrain, their hearts pounding. The next morning, they regrouped. "We can't keep running," said Hannah, the medic. "We need to adapt, or we won't last another day." Elijah nodded. "We have to think like this planet. Everything here is bigger, stronger. If we can't match its scale, we'll use its strengths to our advantage." The crew began working together, using their tools and the planet's resources to survive. They crafted weapons from the sharp edges of broken plants and built stronger shelters using the natural stone around them. While searching for food, they discovered colossal fruits hanging from trees. The challenge was reaching them. The gravity made climbing nearly impossible, and the trees were too wide for their ropes to secure properly. Eliza had an idea. "We can use the drones," she said. They reprogrammed their remaining drones to carry sharp tools, cutting the fruit from the trees and letting it fall to the ground. It was dangerous work, as the noise often attracted predators, but it provided the crew with enough food to last several days. As they explored, they stumbled upon ruins, massive stone structures buried under layers of vegetation. Inside, they found carvings and strange devices left by an alien species. The carvings told a story of beings who had tried to settle on Colossus long ago, but failed. "Too vast, too hostile," Elijah read aloud from one of the symbols. "They couldn't survive here." Hannah frowned. "If they couldn't, what chance do we have?" Eliza's jaw tightened. "We're not them. We're human. We've survived worse, and we'll survive this." Inspired by the ruins, Elijah studied the alien devices. She found a way to use them to amplify their ship's broken distress signal. It was a risky plan, as activating the device could draw attention from the planet's predators, but they had no other choice. The crew set the device up in an open clearing, with drones flying overhead to scout for danger. As they powered it on, the device emitted a low hum, sending out pulses of light and sound into the sky. Moments later, the ground shook. A colossal predator, larger than anything they had seen, emerged from the forest. Its roar echoed across the plains, and it charged toward the crew. "Hold your ground," Elijah shouted. Using their makeshift weapons, the crew fought back, targeting the creature's vulnerable joints and eyes. The battle was fierce, but their teamwork and quick thinking allowed them to drive the predator away. As the creature retreated, the distress signal device blinked, indicating that it had successfully sent their location. A rescue ship responded within hours, descending from the sky like a beacon of hope. As the crew boarded the ship, Alasa looked back at Colossus. Despite its dangers, it had taught them something important. "This planet tried to break us," she said, "but it only made us stronger." Colossus was a world of giants, but it couldn't crush the indomitable spirit of humanity. Gargantua was not just big, it was incomprehensibly vast. The planet's continents were so massive that even with advanced vehicles, it took years to travel between settlements. The human colonies on this supersized world were struggling. Towns lived in isolation, unable to share resources or trade, and starvation loomed in many regions. Nia Harper, a young engineer, stood on a hill overlooking her hometown, Horizon's End. It was a small settlement on the edge of an endless plain, surrounded by towering mountains in the distance. She clenched her fists as she listened to the mayor speak. "We've lost contact with Ridge Valley again," the mayor said to the gathered crowd. "Without their grain, we won't make it through the winter." Nia had heard enough. She pushed through the crowd and raised her voice. "We don't have to live like this anymore." The people turned to her, their faces weary. "And what's your solution, Nia?" Someone called out. "This planet's too big for us to conquer." "We don't have to conquer it," Nia replied. "We just need to connect it. I can build a railway, a massive train that links every colony on Gargantua. We'll share resources, trade, and finally work together." The crowd murmured, doubtful. "A railway? Across this whole planet?" the mayor asked. "It's impossible." Nia stood firm. Impossible is what humans do best. Over the next few weeks, Nia gathered a small team of volunteers, farmers, mechanics, and builders who believed in her vision. Together, they began working on the railway's first section. The challenges were immediate and overwhelming. The first obstacle was the terrain. Gargantua's land was unpredictable, with wide canyons, towering cliffs, and endless plains of thick, unyielding soil. Building a straight path for the railway seemed impossible. Nia devised a solution. "We'll use the planet's gravity to help us," she explained. "Instead of fighting the terrain, we'll build around it, using natural slopes and valleys to power the train." Her team built a prototype engine, powered by a combination of solar energy and gravitational force. It was slow and fragile, but it worked. The first test run covered a few miles, and the team cheered as the train chugged forward. Word of Nia's project spread, drawing more people to help. Other settlements sent workers, materials, and food. For the first time, the colonies of Gargantua were working together. But not everyone supported the railway. A group of settlers, calling themselves the Guardians of Isolation, believed the railway would destroy their way of life. "We've survived this long on our own," their leader, Jarek, said in a public broadcast. "We don't need a train to bring outsiders to our lands." One night, the Guardians sabotaged the construction site, destroying weeks of work. Nia's team woke to find tracks ripped apart and supplies stolen. "We'll rebuild," Nia said, her voice steady but determined. "They can slow us down, but they won't stop us." The next section of the railway brought even greater challenges. A massive river cut across their path, its currents too strong for traditional bridges. Nia spent sleepless nights studying maps and designing a solution. "We'll build a suspension bridge," she announced one morning, her eyes bright with determination. "It'll be the longest one ever made, but it'll work." Construction on the bridge was slow and dangerous. Workers fought against strong winds and heavy rains, but Nia refused to give up. She worked alongside them, inspiring the team with her unwavering resolve. Finally, the bridge was completed. The first train crossed it, carrying supplies to a neighboring settlement that had been on the brink of starvation. When the train arrived, the settlers wept with relief and gratitude. Asa the railway grew. So did the resistance from the Guardians. Jarek and his group launched an attack on the main construction site, determined to destroy the train before it could complete its journey. Nia and her team fought back, using the train itself as a weapon. They powered it up and drove it toward the attackers, its massive engine roaring like a beast. The Guardians scattered, realizing they couldn't stop the momentum of Nia's vision. Years later, the Great Railway of Gargantua was complete. It stretched across continents, linking every settlement on the planet. Trains carried food, medicine, and people, connecting colonies that had once been isolated. Nia stood on the platform of the central station, watching as the first fully loaded train departed. The crowd around her cheered, their faces filled with hope and pride. The mayor of Horizon's End approached her, his voice full of emotion. "You've changed everything, Nia. This planet felt too big for us, but now it feels like home." Nia smiled, her eyes on the horizon. "Gargantua is still big," she said. "But humans are bigger. We didn't conquer this planet, we connected it." As the train disappeared into the distance, Nia knew the journey was far from over. Gargantua's vastness would always be a challenge, but humanity had proven that no world was too big for their dreams.